Hey there, welcome back to the Breach Report for 2021. This is Joshua Allen here. Give a quick background on myself before we begin. I've spent over a decade in the cybersecurity field working for the DoD, oil and gas, and security service industries. Have a lot of experience in cyber operations as well as system administration. I'm joined here with the CEO of PurpleSec, Jason Firch.
Hey, how's it going? Looking forward to what the new year holds for us in the world of security.
Yeah, so speaking of the new year, we're doing some new things with the show, and I figured we'd kick off with something kind of funny, kind of lighthearted, just to kind of not always be serious about everything, and also to touch on a topic that actually is never really talked about. And then we're going to go into some more serious things like the cybersecurity implications of the Capitol breach. There was a big Windows Defender bug that's related to SolarWinds. Going to cover some of that. T-Mobile also had a small breach, and Ubiquiti has actually been breached as well. So those are everything we're going to cover today. So kicking off, we'll start with the funny bit here. So this comes to us from Bleeping Computer. Some hackers used ransomware to lock victims in their IoT Chastity belt, which is an adult pleasure toy. This is a part of security that never really gets talked about. Is some of the more private connected devices that people will have in their homes for obvious reasons. People want to talk about them, but they also unfortunately get ignored, and so people fall victim to some things. And so actually, what happened here is users got locked in their chassis belt unless they paid a $270 or at the time 0.02 Bitcoin uh, ransom to the hackers. They were also mocking the victims by sending them emails and you know uh, just you know whatever they could do to mock people and try to coax them into paying the ransomware. Uh, Now, these things are made of metal, so you couldn't just cut these off. So this was a pretty serious ransomware here because it's got a physical effect on you, and it's also could potentially be an embarrassing situation for some people. And taking a look at this map here, you can see that it's the scope of this is pretty big. This is obviously a popular thing, in the northern hemisphere internationally.
Can we take a look at the device itself from the pen tester
Oh yeah, so
article?
sure. So
It's
yeah,
this
real
one.
quick on that. So this attack came. Uh, the attack didn't happen in October. This company Pentest Partners actually did some research and found this vulnerability, and it wasn't fixed. And so January of this year, it was actually exploited. This is from Pentest Partners in looks like the UK here. These guys, I've heard of them before. They're pretty big name. They're super professional. They're really good at this stuff, as you can see on here. These guys get all the way down to hardware hacking. So they were the ones who actually initially found this issue. We're going to scroll down a little bit here because we're in another risk of the users. There's the scope of it. Um, this was caused by some insecure code. I'm going to go back actually real quick so we can show. In here, you can see that some of the clear text code. So there were passwords that were stored in this that were accessible by the hackers. Um, if you were locked in, there are some workarounds. The best one here they suggest is connecting to AA batteries to this little white wire on the inside of it if you have to get out. Now, the company who builds this, KUI Cellmate, this company here, their support's actually been doing really well too with releasing people remotely and for those who've reached out to their support. So the it has affected people. Some people have paid ransom, but people also have gotten out of this and gotten around it.
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about IoT devices in like the medical space and the device space, but it's also interesting to hear it across other industries as well, especially something like this that's this discrete. So I think it's just kind of the way the world is these days. If something is connected to Bluetooth, or if you're connecting it up to some app and some other device, be wary of it. Like the devices have become
Yeah,
there's physical ramifications.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the story here is just all too common. This part I've highlighted. They found that making a request to any API endpoint did not require authentication. Using a 6-digit code would return a huge amount of information to that user, such as a plain text password. So with IoT, this is, it's a quantity over quality thing. So they try to program them, just kind of sloppily. Honestly, they cut corners
Hmm.
and stuff like this happens. So I'd say the takeaways for users here is, think about what actually needs to be connected to the internet first and foremost, and then practice good security there on out.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's move on to the big story, the Capitol attack.
Yeah, this is obviously a big national and possibly international
Oh yeah,
story here
definitely. The
is.
world was watching.
Yes, absolutely. So, we all understand the political, I think, ramifications and everything there. So there actually is a cybersecurity twist to this as well. A lot of laptops and other IT equipment was stolen or otherwise accessed during the Capitol riots. Um, that also includes paperwork. So people reported, people who worked in the Capitol building reported that their desks had been rifled through, cell phones were stolen, USB sticks were stolen, laptops were stolen. So obviously these are extremely sensitive devices. These are, executive office of the president, I believe, is where these are all going to fall under here. So that's highly sensitive data. Now the good thing is, because it is, federal systems, there's going to be a lot of security measures in place already that will hopefully mitigate too much of the impact here. Um, but there's quite a bit to talk about here, and we can kind of dive into that a little bit. One of the things that's also kind of interesting is not everything was locked the way it should be. So it's one of those
Yeah,
many
so
terrible
I'm I'm
circumstances.
interested, just from taking this from the very beginning, what's the government's response to something like this? Like how what are some of the steps that the cleanup crew would be taking, the IT support teams, the security teams would be taking after this? What are the actions that they're taking?
So now I can only really speculate what they are doing, because obviously they're not going to make that public. But
Right.
I can tell you what we would have
Like
done
best
when I was.
practices.
Sure. So when I was working in the DoD, what we would have done in a situation like this is, first and foremost, is we would have enacted our remote wiping, remote encryption capabilities, right? And I say both because sometimes you'll be able to wipe it, and sometimes you'll be able to encrypt it. It depends on how long the attacker leaves it on, if they do turn it on, etc. Right? So turn both those on. Try to get that thing just sanitized as soon as possible. Now, these all should have tracking on them as well. So, this is stolen federal property, and actually, there's some major ramifications here. Like, this could also fall into the Anti-Espionage Act. So, the FBI is probably after these things, as well as the State Department. So recovery is a major part of this, because
Mhm.
it's more so than just trying to get it out of their hands. You want to stop any more potential access. You want to prevent it from being, dropped off at a pawn shop and resold. Like, it's happened. I've experienced it. These things can enter the civilian sphere very easily. Um, so you want to get that back, and you want to shred it. That's what the federal government does. They take all the hard drives out, document it, and then shred it completely.
Mhm.
Um, so uh, all those are probably underway. Now, there's already security measures on these things. I really hope. For the DoD stuff, it certainly was. There's encryption at rest. We've got the TPM module. So to even access this thing should require like a FIPS module, a smart card, some kind of physical multi-factor authentication.
Mhm.
Um, it should have it, which would also be required to decrypt anything on it. And multiple access attempts should be locking it out. So and even if they do manage to get in, then there's a bunch of things on the system as well. There's data loss prevention, there's security systems on there. There's this thing can only access it from certain areas, so they would also have to get on the VPN and be able to get into the segmented network and all that. So there's a lot
Mhm.
of stuff that's in place. But there could be some worst case scenarios, especially if some kind of really advanced attacker got a hold of these. Just to kind of maybe put on the tinfoil hat for a minute and say, let's say Russia or China wanted to drop some kind of cyber agent in there to go into the Capitol building and steal these things and use some advanced techniques to break into them. That's where like trying to wipe them and recover them is going to become really important too.
I was just going to ask a follow up to that. A lot of people have talked about concerns over USBs and infecting um, the network or computers that were connected to the network with malicious software from USBs. How realistic is something like that, and what kind of risk does that pose?
I mean, how realistic is it? I mean, it could be done. I mean, USB drops is one of the pen testing type campaigns we do too. Obviously, those are not as sophisticated as maybe a state-sponsored attack could be. So, and this was planned, right? Everybody knew that on the 6th this thing was going to happen. So it's entirely thinkable that one of our political enemies wanted to plant agents in there at this time with the purpose of taking a really advanced malware, something that's on a USB, and going through these offices and trying to infect all these systems. So first and foremost, none of this stuff should be running anything as soon as it's plugged in. You should have to authenticate, access, open, and run to get anything to go in there. So that's going to kind of be your first line of defense, is just preventing anything from running, and of course requiring that access. So, but let's say they thwarted that. Now, also, not everything got locked, and I'm going to pull up something here real quick, and we'll show you that there. But in a lot of these videos I watched, even when this was happening live on the news, is I noticed a lot of these laptops and desktops, when they evacuated the Capitol, they didn't lock their devices, and there's Outlook open, and
I was just going to ask about that one
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. That's obviously a big concern, right? Especially Outlook. I mean, this is it goes into email. All kinds of data that probably shouldn't even be in email is still going to be in there. And so and the other thing is, with those things unlocked, that they've already logged into everything. They've done their single sign-on.
They have access and everything. All it takes is
Everything's already
someone
ready. Yeah,
to
sit
poke
down and
around and look
browse.
at the right things. Yeah.
Which we saw, right? I mean, there were a few people there who decided to take a seat, and who knows how long they had access to those systems. We don't know if they did. We only know what they did based on the live videos. So there's a lot of security implications there. And if one of those people happened to be somebody with really malicious intent, especially with those unlocked computers, that could potentially have some major implications. So I would consider, if I were them, if I were an information assurance agent there, I would consider everyone was compromised. Every single device in there needs to be recovered by the office that manages disposal. And that's what I talked about before, is they'll document everything and they will shred it. Literally, they put hard drives through shredders. Super cool. I've seen them in action. They're pretty
It's
awesome.
insane to think that we go from the SolarWinds breach to impacting the government, not specifically impacting the government like the Capitol attacks, but just having those large breaches exposed back to back. It's just very interesting to see how things are starting to play out, and how I think security is starting to get its dues finally, after all of the different reports that have been coming out and the growing attacks over the years. So, is there any other thoughts that you wanted to bring up on the Capitol attack as it stands today?
I mean, in terms of cybersecurity, I think we've kind of talked about everything we can talk about there. I'm going to pull
Right.
this up real quick.
Oh
Here's
yeah,
the
here's
actual
the
picture of this is actually Nancy Pelosi's Outlook right here. I mean, I guess we can't really see what's in there, which is good. I would
right,
hope
but
not.
her
Yeah.
emails are accessible.
Yep. Which and that's this computer right here that this guy's sitting in front of. So
Yeah,
we
Windows
know that's
L
yep.
people, or
And that's
whatever
the other
the
thing,
Mac version is.
right?
Uh,
See some yeah. There you go. And yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. All they had to do when they left was hit Windows L, and it locks the computer, and it will. And what I don't know what these things require. Clearly, they don't require a smart card that I can see in any of these pictures.
Hmm.
When I worked in the DoD, you had to plug a smart card into a a reader, and that is actually what would bring up the unlock window. Then you typed in your password. So you should pull that, and that automatically locks the system. But I don't
Yeah.
think they have that implemented
I
here.
think that there's going to be some upgrades in the IT infrastructure of the government in the
I sure hope
next
so.
couple of years. All right, let's
Absolutely.
move on to the Microsoft Defender bug. This was another noticeable one this week.
Yeah. So this we just spoke of SolarWinds. So this is related to SolarWinds from what everyone has been reporting here. Um, Big patch just came out this Tuesday. So if that felt like a pretty long update, it was. They patched over 83 vulnerabilities, 10 of which were critical. One of them was an active exploit, which was it was a publicly known exploit. It allowed both escalation of privileges to kernel access and remote code execution through Windows Defender, which is Windows Defender is your the malware and security that you have on Microsoft. So I feel like that just makes it a little bit. It's like an extra stab there that not only is it a compromise, but it's a compromise through the thing that's supposed to be keeping you safe, right?
And not even once though. Add
Right.
to insult to injury. This has happened twice now.
Twice. Yeah, so that's a good thing to point out too. And I just had mentioned this with our first story with the chastity veil thing is that it was disclosed before, it wasn't fixed, and it was exploited. This actually is the same kind of circumstance. Um, Now the difference here is they did try to fix it, but as things typically go in the development world, you fix a bug, five more pop up. I'm sure people are triggered by that one. So this came back actually. Google first discovered it. Google has a big bug bounty program, CVE 2020-0986. Microsoft patched it, but then Google's research, went back over that and discovered that the patch was insufficient because, as I just said, there was more attacks now. So it was different attacks by fixing one. So they create a new CVE number for those attacks, 2020-17-008. And so this is with it's a subset of this one right here, which is a information disclosure vulnerability, and it allows kernel access to all. These are recent, right? 11, 10,
Mhm.
2020. So all the recent Windows versions here. RCE is a big deal, as is kernel access, because it allows you to pretty much do whatever you want. You can install backdoors, drop malware. Being able to run as kernel has an extra cool superpower of being able to run kind of invisibly to the user using traditional, software management tools. Like you won't be able to see that it's running. You don't have to run it before login, so you don't even need somebody to log in for your malware to do whatever it needs to do. They patched this recently, this Tuesday, after discovering through their involvement in researching the SolarWinds attack that this was part of that being actively exploited to help distribute malware as well as to help access secret servers. And some of the SolarWinds attack included signed code, and they were manipulating SAML as well. And this was part of their tool set of doing so. The most recent one is here. This is the latest CVE. This again should have been patched this Tuesday. So if you have not updated your Windows systems yet, please do. This is pretty severe.
Yep. Scary times. A lot of these attacks going through Microsoft. So the T-Mobile one is one that I'm really interested in talking about, specifically because of the industry that it's targeting. So in our trends report, which is up on our website, we talked a little bit about some industries that we think are going to be prime targets for um, threat actors in 2021 through probably the next 4 or 5 years, really. Transportation, construction, energy, mining. But I'm also starting to think that telecommunications needs to be on this one too. Um, Josh and I have talked offline a lot about how SCADA systems for infrastructure, for energy, power plants are historically behind. They're out of date. not just on the security front, but just in how their IT operates, and they make for very vulnerable targets. And so this T-Mobile attack is interesting because it's not the first one that happened in 2020. It's the second data breach that they had. In this case, it was targeting um, what was the acronym? There it is. The
CPNI.
CPNI, customer proprietary network information, which is an FCC term that defines phone records, phone bills, and that type of information. And yeah, may have included phone numbers, number of lines subscribed to an account, and in some cases, call related information collected as part of the normal operation of your wireless service. So no personal identification, um, but that's what they suspect has been impacted. And it's really it's small, only impacting 200,000 of their customers. It's small for them of their 100 million. Um, but I kind of wonder, Josh, like, what do you think, you know, do you see a trend in your view of telecommunication companies kind of being targeted, and if so, why do you think that might be?
Absolutely. To start off with, so as I mentioned, I work in a SOC right now for a SaaS company, and we do have some telecom clients, as well as ISP clients, which I kind of these days are kind of the same thing, right? Practically speaking, and they are under a lot more attack than in any previous decade, really. And there's a couple reasons for that, I believe. So first of all, it's the infrastructure, right? I mean, if you can gain access to it, if you can gain control of it, or if you can distribute something over it, you kind of have a guarantee that you're going to have a lot of victims first and foremost, right? I mean, there's 100 million people on T-Mobile, right? So this particular one only affected 200,000, but that's the scope of what was successful, right? Their goal could have been all 100 million. Imagine if you got spyware on even this was 0.2%. What if it had been 1%, right? That's
Mhm.
1 million people's accounts that you
Or
got
maybe
taken
they were
out,
being very specific, right?
right? Or
Yeah.
potentially, right? They don't have a lot of details coming out of T-Mobile yet for a number of reasons, but we can speculate, right?
Mhm.
So there's kind of backing up a little bit, is like, why would I attack an ISP or a communication? First of all, if T-Mobile communications, ISPs, those are utilities these days. In 2021,
Mhm.
the internet's a utility. So it's just as useful of a target, tactically speaking, if you're trying to, damage, let's say this is a state-sponsored attack and you're trying to damage the United States of America, maybe for a preclusion of war or something, just to, like I said, put on the tinfoil hat again. Um,
Mhm.
Shutting down the internet or cell phone usage across America for even a week, right? I mean, that is chaos.
Puts us back in the 80s
It does. I mean, people think about,
technologically.
yeah, I mean, like Uber can't even run,
I mean, like, think about real-time communications.
all kinds of
How
stuff.
how important that is.
And how many people don't have a landline? So if you need to call 911, right? Oh, there's
Mm,
there's so many
that's
implications
a
there.
really interesting
That
point.
there's
Yeah, everything
all
is
kinds of
cloud. Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. And like I said, Uber and Lyft and a lot of these things that rely on the mobile infrastructure to even do business, right?
Mm.
Um, so it's a huge thing. Now, and what if it was one of a multi-prong attack? You shut off that and you shut off the electricity. Now you have chaos. Um,
Now you're in the Stone Age.
Right. So things are crazy. Or to kind of back up and shift gears and look at it from, maybe a less apocalyptic scope, there's some implications here for fraud and for
Mm.
phishing. And in fact, I'm pretty sure this article here that we're reading, right, phishing, look at this, it mentions it
Yeah.
eight times past data breaches. So, and this is kind of the point is, the point of phishing is you're trying to get people to click things to either download something or to breach their data. And much like phishing, it is a game of casts, right? So you have 100 million casts here, which means you're even if you have only a 0.5% chance of success, if you manage to make all 100 million casts successful, that's 500,000 people that you got to click. It's pretty good.
Right.
um, and the purpose of that is any kind of thing. Could be data theft, could be, like I said, malware, could be just trying to get you. What a big thing is Bitcoin mining, right? They get you to click on something and you think it's just a whatever, it's a phishing link, and you actually downloaded a miner, and it doesn't even really
Yeah.
affect you that much directly. It just steals your electricity.
And it just uses your devices and powers those mines. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, I want to keep an eye out on telecommunications this year. I think there's something to that one. Okay. There's no real other information that's coming out of them right now. We'll see if the story evolves into anything interesting. We'll bring it back up.
As a
Alrighty.
user, just be careful. Just don't fall for phishing. Do the typical things of paying attention to what people are sending you. And phone phishing is really big, so don't answer weird phone calls. Let it go to voicemail.
Never give sensitive information over the phone. All right. Last one is an exploit through Ubiquiti. Ubiquiti, not an exploit, sorry. Ubiquiti is telling its customers to change its passwords after a security breach.
Yeah. So and I'm glad you kind of clarified. So it's a little more precautionary on Ubiquiti's side, although a breach did happen. And so to elaborate on that, um, the servers which stored information pertaining to user profiles for the Ubiquiti login account.ui.com. That's their web portal for managing your account details, as well as you can get into your devices through there from anywhere. That infrastructure that runs that runs through a third-party cloud vendor, which I tried to research and I could not find, which is probably a good thing that I don't know who it is, but I'm sure if we do some more research, we might be able to find a cloud vendor who is breached and correlate it to this attack, perhaps. Don't know who it is right now, but
Potentially, that would be very sensitive information, I would imagine.
potentially, yeah. But it'd be an interesting exercise on our part. So
Hmm.
their cloud vendor was breached, which allowed some attackers to access a server owned by Ubiquiti. The server had um, all this information on there, the profile information, names, email addresses, salted and hashed passwords, which that's really the big concern. Now, they they didn't say for sure if those things were accessed. They just know that the server itself was accessed. So, doing the diligence here, they went and said, look, as soon as that thing was breached, just consider everything on a compromise, change everything. Um, if you have your home address and your phone numbers on your profile, that might be there, which again, spam, right? Or potentially identity theft implications. So there's for the user, there's a couple things here. Number one, do as they tell you. If you're a user, you would have gotten this email, which is update your password, as you should be doing regularly anyway, and implement multi-factor authentication, which you should be doing anyway, in my opinion. The other thing is, and I want to talk about this part right here, but only if users decided to configure this information into the portal. People need to be a lot more conscientious about the data that they're putting online. You know, you're we've seen, T-Mobile gets breached. Your phone number is something that can be used as, side arbitrary information to help those kinds of breaches. Um, a lot of pen testing is not about just getting one win. It's about taking tiny information from a bunch of sources and putting it all together to turn it into a bigger attack. So kind of thinking about, do you really need the information on a website, on a portal, on a whatever? If you really don't need it, don't put it on there. It's just extraneous information that could potentially be, abused.
Yep, that's well said, Josh. I think that's all we have for this week's episode. If you enjoy this, please like, subscribe, do all that other good stuff. Definitely, if you want to be active in the comments, we're always receptive to feedback. And if there's anything that you want to see us do, cover differently, the different breaches that are coming out, definitely interested in learning more about that.
Yeah, and we're also very interested in having more people on this show. It's just the two of us right now, but if you are out there listening and you're an expert in one of these fields, especially like threat research, I'm not a threat researcher. I'd love to hear from some of you guys who have some experience with this. So, you know, go to the purplesec.us website to contact us and let us know if you are interested in contributing to the show. Be great.